I'm Scott Conway, PhD, JD with 4P360. Find us, of course, online at 4P360.com. In 4P360 Leadership, what I'm going to talk about right now is what I call the audience precedent. Now, this is actually two separate things that go together. The first piece is to remember you have an audience. The second thing to remember is you are setting a precedent. And we're going to build into this, that you have an audience, you're setting a precedent. In 4P360, you take both of those things into account. In fact, the development of 4P360 as a system does take these into account. I was recently interviewed by Sean Oliver. Sean Oliver has a program called Next Level Conversation. He is a leadership instructor. Something he and I both have in common is we've both been trained by John Maxwell. In Sean's case, he's been certified by John Maxwell for the Maxwell-style leadership. And of course, Sean and I have gotten to be associates, friends, and colleagues, and have gotten to know one another because we do a lot of things that are similar. And he was intrigued by 4P360 because his particular certification from Maxwell focuses on John Maxwell's 360-degree leadership. Now, if you get John Maxwell's book, 360-Degree Leadership, it talks about leading down, leading sideways, and leading up, the basic directions of 360-degree leadership. So as you can imagine, it's intriguing when the three directions of 360-degree leadership is suddenly met with the 7 directions of 4P360. And so you can imagine if your expertise is conventional 360-degree leadership, that's going to get your attention, and of course it did. And during this interview, one of the signature things we talked about is how to fire people. That as he and I had this discussion, I said, well, in the 4P360 system, in using positive outcomes in negative situations, one of the most negative situations when you have to let someone go. When you have to get rid of someone because they're not doing the job. When you're dealing with someone who may be filled with excuses, who may want to think of you as the bad guy, how do you let that person go in a way that ends up ultimately being powerful, they're gone, practical, that there's going to be a use, you're going to have to fire people, and you need to do it in a way that's not going to do damage. It's going to be principled. How are you going to do this in ways that you can adjust to each individual firing situation in case there's some unique things in it? And it has to be positive. How do you actually build a relationship in the process of firing someone? And it's by firing someone with some class. So the same technique used to remove someone from a position is also used to remove someone from a project. Same thing you would use to remove someone from any kind of team, to transfer them out of your department, to send them somewhere else, or to get rid of anyone from a particular job or a particular position. In fact, the same sort of technique, the same sort of principle can be used for ending friendships, for ending even romantic relationships. Anytime there's a need to bring an end to a relationship, the basic principles remain the same. Short version of it, it happens in 1 to 3 conversations, depending upon the nature of the relationship. To start off with, someone needs to know what are the requirements of the job. Now, in most workplaces, if you have good position descriptions, if you have what we call key performance indicators, basically, the position descriptions, if you're going to do quarterly or annual evaluations, the position descriptions is this is what your job was, how did you do? Key performance indicators are like daily or weekly measures. How do you know if you're winning? Now, you have those in place already. Someone already knows what the expectations of this position is. They already know what their day-to-day or week-to-week tasks are supposed to be. They already know the outcomes they're supposed to be producing. Then you have a start. Somewhere along the line, there will be a discussion on the gaps. Because if there are any gaps, obviously if someone's doing their job and they're doing the job well, you're not going to want to fire them. So assuming you want to fire someone, you want to get rid of someone, there is presumptively a gap between the expectations of the position and the actual performance. So if you already have that part established when you're talking about the performance, you just have a discussion like, all right, well, you already know these are the requirements. You also see that these are the gaps. These are the problems that we've seen. Do we have this correct? Now, they may have excuses. If they have excuses, hear them out. But ultimately, what you're after is to establish the fact of the gap. Now, if this is a second discussion, if you want to give them an opportunity, you can ask them, now, are you able to close this gap? Are you able to go from here to there? If you're able to do the full job, I'm willing to give you a shot. I would love to see you be able to do this. And sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. A lot of people want to give it a shot. Sometimes they'll just admit that they can't do it. And again, they may have every excuse in the world, in which case, hear them out, jot down what the reasons are, pay attention, And I say, okay, I understand that those are very good reasons. But ultimately, we still need this done. So from what you're telling me, it doesn't look like you're able to close the gap. So this position may not be the position for you. Do I understand this correctly? Now they, again, may have other things to say, and you hear them out, but you go back to this are the requirements for the position that we hired you for. This is what we're paying for. We're paying for this, and you're not able to do all of that. You're able to do only this part of what we're looking for. And as you use this technique, ultimately what you're after, they recognize there's a gap, you give them a choice. Now, if you would like, if it's your preference that we fire you for whatever reason you might have for us to fire you, I'm happy to do that for you if that's what you want. If, however, you would rather resign the position, just basically we have this meeting, you say, I know what the job entails, I thought I could do the job, I have discovered I'm not able to close the gaps, it's not fair of me to continue to try to hang on to the position, and I hereby submit my resignation, and I will seek a different position that I know I will be able to perform. And if you do something like that, if you take that level of responsibility, you will do that for your next employer. So that at your next employer or in your next position, you will either close the gap or you will admit that you can't. If they call us for a recommendation, we will give you a glowing recommendation. Because someone who takes that level of responsibility, someone who recognizes what they're in a position for, to do the position, that's what they're being paid for, and you show that level of maturity, that level of respect, you honor the company at that level, of course we'll give you a great recommendation. If, however, you put us in a position where we're forced to fire you, obviously if someone calls and asks if we would hire you back, the answer would, of course, have to be no. We would prefer not to do that, but if you have a reason you would like that to be the answer, of course, we're happy to do that. So what is your preference? And you let them decide. Now, so far, every single person I've seen in this position has actually submitted the resignation. Now, they might have some reasons why some people want to be fired. And of course, this will vary based upon any union contracts or any other, laws and regulations may apply to a particular industry. But that's the technique in a nutshell. And so when you're applying this technique, you remember you have an audience and you're setting a precedent. And so if you're using the 4 pillars, if you're using the 360-degree leadership in the 7-direction check, you will be able to make good decisions. Now, you can see how this technique, it's powerful. The person's going to be gone. It's practical. There's a use for having to fire people and knowing how to do it well. It's principled, that there are systems and techniques. It's not scripted in the strict sense of like you follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in your lines and they're gone. It's principled so you can adjust and adapt and make allowances for the individuals and kind of adjust the meeting based upon some of the details. And it's positive. It actually builds the relationship. As you utilize these, and in the 7 directions, you do this leading down. Is this the way you would like to be fired? If someone wasn't happy with you, would you rather they came into your office, they yelled and screamed and said, you're fired, get your stuff and get out of here? Or would you rather have a discussion like this? Would you rather have an opportunity to close the gaps? Would you rather have someone make sure you understand what your position is? Would you rather have someone make sure you understand what your key performance indicators are? And that if the problem was you didn't know, that no one had told you or told you how to find these things out, that rather than being fired for something you didn't even know about, that you're given the opportunity now to close that gap. Is that the way you would like to be fired if you were going to be let go? I think so. And then going sideways, if you're watching one of your peers be handled like this, is that the way you think your peers should be handled? Is this how you would like things handled on project teams? Is this how you'd like things handled in departments and divisions? In fact, if you had a friend who was ending a relationship with you, would you rather have a discussion like that, or would you rather have a yelling, screaming, I never want to see you again, get the heck out of my life kind of decision? And so you see the power of this, applying the 4 pillars, using the 7-direction check, taking a look at it, and seeing how you're going to handle it, is applying the 4P360 system. But now remember, you have an audience, and you are setting a precedent. The audience you have, a lot of people forget about, is the team you still have. If you have people still working for you after you fire this person, they all got to see how you fired this person. If the person you're firing has any social connections to the rest of the people, even if you thought you did it in private, they are connected and people will find out how it went down. You have an audience. and you're setting a precedent. So the audience is the team you have. The precedent you're setting is what is the expectation of the next person who thinks they might be on the chopping block. What are they going to be looking for? So there is one major employer not too far from where my office is that fired several people, and all that happened is they got a FedEx letter that basically included a pink slip. No one talked to them. No one told them what the gap was. They were just informed, your division's being shut down, you're being let go, here's your last paycheck. Don't come into work on Monday. Now, besides the fact that that has a class problem, I mean, how classy is it to do that to those people? But the people still working at the company side, that's the way you do things? That you sent them home on a Friday with no indication? And then there's a FedEx letter that gets dropped off to them on Saturday telling them not to come in on Monday? So that means I could go home on any given day and the FedEx is going to show up for me the next day and it's just over? No warning? That's it? What is that going to do to the morale of the people you still have? So if you remember, when you fire someone, when you handle any negative situation, you have an audience. It's easy to think when I'm firing someone, I don't have an audience unless I'm firing the person publicly. You do, because the people still with you are seeing how you handle this. And when the people who still work for you are seeing how you handle this, you want to make sure you are handling it in a way that garners their respect. That doesn't instill fear into their hearts and destroy their morale. If you're dealing with knowledge workers, if you're dealing with grown-ups, if you're dealing with professionals, if you're dealing with anyone who comes from a place of responsibility, and they see that they are not going to be handled in a respectful way, they see they are not going to be handled in any way that honors them as a human being, that they're just going to be treated like cogs in the machine, then they may start behaving like cogs in the machine. Now, by the way, if you do honor people, if you build relationship, if you understand that people are whole people, and these whole people have whole lives, and their job is only a portion of their whole lives, and you understand that, and people still behave like they're just cogs in the machine, they just show up for the paycheck, well, those are people, over the due course of time, you will probably be cycling out, because you're looking for people who are whole people with whole lives, who understand how to behave in a responsible, professional manner, who bring some pride in their accomplishments at work, who take their work seriously and treat it as though it's meaningful. Those are the people you're looking for. And so if someone needs to be handled negatively, and that seems to be the only way to get through to them, ultimately those are the kind of people that you will eventually want to be filtering out of your team. Now, if you are firing someone, and you do it with dignity, you do it with class, you honor and respect them as people, even whole people, and then they have whole lives, and they may have very good reasons they can't do the job, and you honor that. And you don't fire them because they're bad, you just fire them or allow them to resign because these are the things we need, this is what we're paying for, and if you have even the best reasons in the world why you can't do this, that's okay. We're not saying you're a bad person, you just can't fulfill what we need for this position. Does that make sense? Now, something else to also look for is be diplomatic about people who are gone. Always be diplomatic about ex-team members. Why? Because all the team members you have know that sooner or later, in the due course of time, they might be an ex-team member. And also, you yourself, one of these days might be an ex-team member. And there's all kinds of ways to become ex-team members. Of course, one of them is you get fired. So if someone gets fired and they say, I see how you talk about people once they're gone. Someone might even get promoted. You could get promoted out of this position. Now you're no longer here in this office. What precedent do you want to set about how people are talked about when they're gone? Someone may just transfer to a different division. Someone may resign their job and go work somewhere else. They may move away. Any number of things could happen to make someone an ex-team member. How do you talk about ex-team members? And if you talk about ex-team members with dignity, if you talk about them in a respectful manner, even if you don't like what they did, you're still reasonably respectful of them, then eventually when you are the X team member, when someone else is the X team member, they have an expectation that they will be reasonably honored, that they will be discussed with respect. Even if they messed up, they will still be discussed with respect and treated as though they were real human beings. And you will someday be an X team member. Either because you got promoted, because you moved on, because whatever happened in your life. And when you're the X team member, how do you want to be discussed? And that's, of course, part of the 7-direction check. And so as you're doing the 7-direction check, if you're doing it to that down person who's gone, well, how would you want it done to you if you're gone? Sideways to you if you're gone. And that's how you talk about people. Now, 4P360, of course, stands for 4-pillar, 360-degree leadership. The 4 pillars are that your leadership techniques must be powerful. Your leadership techniques must be practical. Your leadership techniques must be principled. And your leadership techniques must be positive. And by positive, we mean that they focus on what you are trying to accomplish, not what you're trying to get away from. Where you are going, not where you're not going. They focus on building connection, building relationship, not destroying connection, destroying relationship. And when you do this kind of 4P360, you build relationship, you build honor, you build respect. Of the 360-degree leadership, we have basic directions of 360-degree leadership. Of course, you're always leading down. That's basic fundamental leadership. You're leading across. The sideways leadership, you're leading up. And leading up is how you lead your boss. How do you help take things off your boss's plate so the things your boss would otherwise have to do himself or herself, you have now made that easier. And they call that leading up. In 4P360, we also talk about downward diagonal and upward diagonal. Downward diagonal is leading the peers of your direct reports or leading the direct reports of your peers. And so these are your direct reports down here, and these are your peers over here. So either your peers' direct reports or your direct reports' peers. The upward, so we'll just call this the boss or your leader. And over here, this is the peer of your leader, or it is the leader of your peer. And there's different dynamics in how you handle that and how you go about that and how you sort of play that so that you're applying the 4 pillars in these 5 directions. And of course, in our 4P360 leadership, you have self-leadership. How do you lead yourself? And finally, we have reverse leadership, and that's when leadership is coming to you, how you help other people influence you, how you help give them guidance, give them insight, give them understanding, how to influence you and how to make a difference. We call that the double O feature. So the basic directions is conventional 360-degree leadership. We call these bonus directions. And then the double O feature 01 is the self-leadership, and the 02 is the reverse leadership. And so with 7 directions, with the double O feature, you could get playful with it and call it, your 007 leadership if you wanted to. And for some of us, that would be cool. And understand, 4P360 leadership, it is designed to work in all these directions. And it is designed to be able to build relationship. It is designed to be able to be something you are willing to have witnessed. You're willing to have people know about. Because when you lead, you have an audience. When you troubleshoot, you have an audience. And when you fire someone, even though that person is gone, you still have an audience. And as you handle these things, you are setting a precedent. Now there's another principle, is that which you do, expect to have done to you. And in this idea, if your boss sees the way you handle people and will handle you the same way, your handling of your subordinates, your handling of your direct reports is informing your boss of the way you expect to be handled. And so when you're dealing with stuff like this, always be aware that your audience isn't just your direct reports that remain. Your audience can be your boss. Your audience can be your peers. Your audience can be the bosses of your peers, or it can be the peer of your boss. Your audience isn't just your direct reports that remain, it's also direct reports of your peers, and it is the peers of your direct reports. These 7 directions inform you of how big this audience can be. And then, of course, also you have the thing of, if you do this to other people, is that the way you really do want it done to yourself? And it's classic golden rule that we all learned when we were kids. 4P360 leadership takes all of this into account. And always remember, audience and precedent. And you are setting the precedent in front of an audience. You are creating an expectation for them, and that they will respond to that expectation. This is Scott Conway for 4P360 Leadership, 4P360.com. Thank you.